Good Tuesday morning, and thank you for being with us here on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Jason Hackett. Let's get right to your headlines. Just in this morning, alpine skiing legend Lindsey Vonn's Olympic dreams are still alive. She said this morning she will compete after a nasty crash last week during a World Cup race. Vonn says she ruptured her left ACL during that crash, but that as long as she has a shot at winning, she's going to go for it.
So this is not obviously what I had hoped for. I've been working really hard to come into these games in a much different position. I know what my chances were before the crash, and I know my chances aren't the same as it stands today, but I know there's still a chance. And as long as there's a chance, I will try.
It's going to be something to watch there. Also developing this morning, another round of mass resignations at the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office. KARE 11 confirmed 8 people resigned this time. Now 14 people total are gone from the office, with experts calling this unprecedented in the history of Minnesota. Audrey is at the U.S. District Court in Minneapolis with some new information for us.
Yeah, it's a number worth repeating. 14 vacancies in this office behind me. Staggering turnover. What else is staggering? The workload left behind. Of the 8 new resignations we confirmed in the last 12 hours, we know 7 are assistant U.S. attorneys and 1 is a victim witness specialist. Now, some of these veteran prosecutors were in the middle of investigating massive fraud cases. Now, the feds cited fraud as a major reason why Operation Metro Surge began. Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Doug Kelly says an influx of immigration cases has now forced fraud on the back burner.
Fraud has been forgotten in all of the events recently. It will take a long time to replace this experience. Between the 6 that departed before and the 8 who are departing now, kind of the leadership in the office has been decapitated.
Now, the first wave of resignations last month came after the Department of Justice declined to open a civil rights probe into the federal agent who shot Renee Good. The feds instead pushed the U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate Good's widow. Back to you.
Audrey, thank you very much. We're also following breaking news in St. Paul from overnight, where police are investigating a deadly shooting. Police were called to Oneida Street around 10 last night, where they found a man inside a car shot several times in the chest. Despite life-saving measures, officers say the man died on scene. Right now, they're working to find out what led up to the shooting and who's responsible. This is the second homicide in St. Paul this year, according to police. New this morning, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says all federal officers in the field in Minneapolis will wear body cameras, eventually looking to take that nationwide. It's one of the conditions Democrats have been demanding as part of a funding fight that has 70% of the government shut down. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he is confident that shutdown will end today. Alice Barr is in D.C. with the very latest.
Hi there. The House is working to keep minimal disruptions in this partial shutdown by voting to reopen the government today. But serious questions remain about finding common ground on the tense topic of immigration enforcement.
The push is on today to pull the federal government out of a partial shutdown, with some federal workers furloughed once again. House Speaker Mike Johnson sounding confident he'll have the votes to change that.
We got FEMA and TSA and troop pay and everything else wrapped into this, so we've got to get the job done.
The House will be in order.
The House is set to vote today on a Senate-passed package that fully funds most of the government, but the Department of Homeland Security gets just 2 weeks of funding and a tall task in that time for lawmakers to negotiate reforms to immigration enforcement, with Democrats calling for dramatic changes amid unrest over the shooting deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy by federal officers in Minnesota.
The American people are correctly demanding accountability. The American people want to see the mask come off.
One demand already met as the Homeland Security Secretary announced body cameras for all federal immigration officers in Minneapolis, with plans to expand that nationwide as funding allows. President Trump backing the move.
They generally tend to be good for law enforcement because people can't lie about what's happening.
While also calling on both sides to pass the funding package with no changes and promising to work together to address issues raised. Though reaching agreement on the future of ICE won't be easy, with Republicans not backing down on their immigration crackdown.
If the Democrats want to throw out these ridiculous proposals that make it harder for ICE to do their job, that's just not going to happen.
The hope now to avoid a prolonged standoff.
Several leading Democrats called the move to issue body cameras a good start, but they want that policy written and signed into law. Republican Lisa Murkowski agreed, citing an erosion of trust between Congress and the administration, part of the challenge with a tight timeline to find reforms that 60 senators and the House can agree on. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Now, this all comes just hours after the Hennepin County Medical Examiner ruled Alex Preddy's death a homicide. Preddy was shot by federal immigration agents last month. The report released yesterday shows he died from multiple gunshot wounds. It's important to note the designation of homicide is not a legal judgment of guilt. And this all comes after ProPublica reported the identities of the immigration agents accused of firing their weapons at Preddy. They are Border Patrol agent Jesus Ochoa and Customs and Border Protection Officer Raimundo Gutierrez, both of South Texas. ProPublica said government records corroborated the agents' identities. Also happening on Capitol Hill today, we're going to hear from the brothers of Renee Good, the woman shot and killed by an ICE agent last month. They're set to testify at a hearing focused on the, quote, violent tactics and disproportionate use of force by ICE agents. That hearing is scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. Well, Target's new CEO is taking over the company as it continues to be challenged by protests, boycotts, and a recent sales slump. Michael Fidelki shared a letter yesterday addressing customers, employees, and business partners. In that letter, he acknowledges that the company has real work to do and says he'll spend the weeks ahead listening closely and, quote, moving with clarity and urgency. A professor with the University of Minnesota says Target has a branding and identity problem. The professor says over the years, Target has faced backlash from people on both sides of the political spectrum.
The brand is trying to tread a fine line in a politically polarized world. Pick your battlefield, plant your flag, and stick with it. Don't surprise people by suddenly switching to the other side or not being clear about where you stand.
Target is one of more than 60 Minnesota-based companies that signed onto an open letter last week calling for, quote, an immediate de-escalation of tensions and for state, local, and federal officials to work together to find real solutions. This morning, there are 2 new arrests connected to last month's anti-ICE protest that disrupted a church service in St. Paul. That brings the number of people arrested to 9, including Don Lemon and Twin Cities journalist Georgia Ford. In a social media post yesterday, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi named the latest 2 arrestees as Ian Austin and Jerome Richardson. A grand jury in Minnesota indicted all 9 individuals on federal civil rights charges, including interfering with the First Amendment rights of worshipers at the city's church in St. Paul. The protesters targeted the church because they believe one of the pastors works for ICE. Today, the man accused of kidnapping and assaulting a 7-year-old girl in Zimmerman will be in court. And this morning, investigators are stepping up their search for answers. Megan McPherson's at the live desk with a new call for help.
Good morning. New details to share as Joseph Bragg prepares to face a judge. He is scheduled to appear in a Sherburne County courtroom at 10:30 today for what's known as a Rule 8 hearing. During that hearing, the prosecutor is expected to turn over evidence, and Bragg could be asked to enter a plea. Bragg now faces felony kidnapping and felony criminal sexual conduct charges. Investigators say he took the 7-year-old girl to a hotel room more than 130 miles from her home. Court records show Bragg did not know the girl or her family, but her mother told investigators she had what she described as an unusual online interaction with him back in December. Since then, several parents have reached out to KARE 11 saying Bragg tried to offer babysitting or nanny services in local Facebook groups. This is something the Sherburne County Sheriff's Office confirms they are now investigating. Here's what the administrator of one of those groups told us.
A lot of those people who had said that he reached out said his interactions, they just felt kind of weird. It felt like he was pressuring them into letting him babysit. And I have not heard of anyone in our group that actually went forward with that.
Within the last 16 hours or so, county officials have issued a new request asking any parents who employed Bragg for childcare or anyone he contacted to come forward. If you think this might be you, you're asked to call the BCA hotline on your screen. That number is 651-793-2465. The Sherburne County Sheriff's Office is being assisted by the BCA and the FBI in their investigation. We will continue to follow this case and share any updates both on air and online at KARE11.com.
Megan, thank you. This morning, the man accused of assaulting Congresswoman Ilhan Omar will be back in court. Today, a judge will decide whether Anthony Kazmaricek should stay in custody while he waits for his trial to begin. The 55-year-old is accused of charging at Omar and spraying apple cider vinegar on her during a town hall. He's facing several charges, including assault on a U.S. employee. This morning, Olympic organizers are rushing to get the new Santa Julia Ice Hockey Stadium ready in time for the Games. The IOC says everything will be in place for women's prelims, which begin on Thursday.
For the Games, there's rigging, there's cameras still to be installed or finalized, there's cabling still to be finalized, and obviously there's still cleaning to do to make sure it all looks spick and span before the Games.
The arena is one of 2 new venues being constructed in Milan for the Olympics. Almost 1.2 million tickets have been sold for the Games, with ice hockey topping the list. This year's Olympics also mark the return of NHL players for the first time since 2014. Make sure you stick with us. More news and weather coming up right after the break.